Thank you so much for staying with us. We continue with you on Beyond the Headlines. A reminder that our WhatsApp number is 876-254-0693. 876-254-0693. Give us your first name, give us your general location. Last week, the People's National Party criticized the decision of the Jamaica Urban Transit Company to move out of 23 of their routes, saying that was a major breach of the company's exclusive license under the Public Passenger Transport Kingston Metropolitan Transport Region Act. On Friday, we spoke with opposition spokesperson on transport, Michael Phillips, who was explaining why they said it was a breach of the exclusive license.
In the past, what the JUTC would have done was to franchise out the routes to operators, but they are still owners of those routes. In this instance, the minister is now issuing route license on JUTC routes, which is in contravention to the license itself, because in the KMTR, the JUTC has the exclusive license for the KMTR, hence why you have Hackney carriage operators and you don't have route operators.
He said he had a number of questions in relation to what had been announced.
Is it that the JUTC is relinquishing the license, or are they now sub-franchising those routes from the JUTC? That is unclear. When you look at the routes from Papine to, which is one of the routes, Papine to Halfway Tree, JUTC buses run on those routes also. Is it that when the minister gets more buses, will he be removing those route taxi operators from that route, which is a profitable route to the JUTC? Is he looking from Halfway Tree to Duhaney Park? That is also a profitable route for the JUTC. So what will happen when the JUTC, because the government is importing an additional 100 buses, which should reach here in June. What will then happen to those route operators? What will happen to the commuting public? How many operators are they giving route taxi license to operate on those routes? Will the Hackney carriage operators be able to run on the same route as they have been doing since the JUTC has not provided enough seats? What is the overall plan?
That was Michael Phillips, the opposition spokesperson on transport. And joining us, we have Ralston Smith, Managing Director at the Transport Authority. Mr. Smith, appreciate you talking to us. Thank you so much.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. All right, well, let's take a step back a little bit and tell us in terms of what's the rationale. Well, no, let me rephrase that. What exactly is happening with these 23 routes?
Well, in terms of the 23 route, the Transport Authority is currently working to ensure that the Hackney carriage operators who intend to convert from route taxi to Hackney carriage are able to do so. So in terms of parking arrangements, both downtown and in the Halfway Tree area to include Papine, those are some of the things that the authority is currently working on. The Transport Authority's licensing machine is currently ensuring that those routes are currently updated to our route monitoring system and that the appropriate fare structures are attached. One of the things I want to remind the public about is that, by and large, many of the complaints I hear, especially in the corporate area, in respect of overcharging, relates to Hackney carriage operators that are providing route taxi type services along these JUTC routes. And what the commuters do, they compare what the actual fare should be in a route taxi or stage carriage arrangement and compare that with what the Hackney carriage operators are charging them. So it's one of the situations that we have to treat it. It's currently confusing and conflating the issue because the route taxi fare structure and the Hackney carriage fare structure are two different fare structures. The Hackney carriage fare structure is at a higher premium because how the Hackney carriage operators are to operate, they're supposed to operate on call, charter, pickup, and they charge you a premium for that. For example, if we were to look at the Papine to Halfway Tree area, in a Hackney carriage, the fare would be computed based on a mechanism for calculating the Hackney carriage fare, some in the region of $800. What we find that the Hackney carriage operators are doing, they're carrying 4 passengers at separate fare, which is a feature of the route taxi arrangement. It's not a feature of the Hackney carriage. When they carry those 4 passengers, they split the Hackney carriage $800 fares into 4 and charge each passenger $200. Now, the passengers would cry out and complain that they're overcharged because the fare on a route taxi, if you were to price it using the route taxi mechanism, is $180. So that's one of the issues that we have to treat with in this whole arrangement. And I think the transition gives the authority an opportunity to correct this particular mischief and to ensure that there are proper fare structures that are aligned to each route, and the commuters will be better able to be served by the operating public.
All right, I tell you what, I don't think I got an answer to my question at all, but let's try again after the break. We're talking to Ralston Smith, Managing Director at the Transport Authority. We're back in a moment. Thank you so much for staying with us. We continue with you on Beyond the Headlines. I'm Dion Jacksmiller. We're talking to Ralston Smith, Managing Director at the Transport Authority. This following concerns which had been expressed by the opposition, which had said that 23 JUTC routes were being abandoned by the company and saying that was a breach of the exclusive license of the JUTC. Mr. Phillips, the opposition spokesperson on transport, had said the 23 routes accounted for more than 25% of those in the Kingston Metropolitan Transport Region, and that removing the buses from those routes, he said, amounts to an abdication of the company's responsibility to provide service. And let me come back to you, Mr. Smith, because I understand the explanation you are giving in relation to the overcharging issue, which people have been talking to us about. But in relation to these 23 routes, is it that the buses, JUTC buses, will be running on them, will not be running on them? What's the situation?
Yes, the argument that JUTC will abandon these 23 routes is not true.
I'm so sorry. Talk into the phone a little bit more if you could. You sound a little muffled.
The argument that JUTC will abandon these 23 routes is not true. The JUTC will continue to operate alongside these route taxi operators because, as you have just said a while ago, these Hackney carriage operators have been operating there already. So remember now that JUTC operates on a schedule. So especially during the off-schedule arrangement, the route taxi operators come in handy in terms of convenience and service to the commuting public. So as far as I know, I don't know, speak for the JUTC, but as far as I know, there's no intention by the JUTC at this time to abandon those routes.
How does this affect the revenue and the profitability of the routes? What's the projection?
Well, in terms of revenue and profitability, that's something that JUTC will have to speak to. But as a regulator, the Transport Authority is more concerned about the order of the public passenger vehicle operation insofar as they should be compliant with the statute that are laid down. The Hackney carriage operators, as they are now operating, majority of them are operating contrary to the terms and condition of the license, and the law prescribes seizure as a remedy for this particular activity. Now, if you go out there and seize these vehicles, you are displacing them, and a lot of the commuters would be left stranded. So an opportunity now is being worked out where they can regularize themselves in terms of obtaining the appropriate license, having a proper fare structure attached to each route, and can provide the right service at the right price to the commuting public.
So why is that the better alternative in your view, other than ensuring that they're not running on the routes they're not supposed to be running on?
Yes, it's a better alternative at this point in time because you displace a lot of the operators. And recall now that we're coming from an era JUTC was unable to satisfy the needs. They didn't have the seats, they didn't have the buses. And these Hackney carriage operators, for those number of years, were providing the services along the route, satisfying the demand of the customers. And it would be difficult, if not dishonest, just to displace them.
You spoke about order, though. Aren't the taxes one of the biggest sources of disorder in the city?
Well, I have known discomfort in terms of how you characterize your operation. In fact, the Transport Authority...
I'm so sorry, I missed that. I didn't hear that. You have what?
We have no disagreement in terms of how you characterize their operation.
Okay.
In fact, the Transport Authority is concerned about the operation of the taxi operators in the city and elsewhere. And so one of the things that the Transport Authority is working on in concert with other state agencies to include the KMTR, National Works Agency, is to find appropriate parking spaces for these taxi operators. We're looking at an area in Papine, we're looking at South Prairie, downtown Kingston, we're looking at another property that is owned by Jamaica Agricultural Society, and we have expanded our wings all the way into Discovery Bay, looking at property out there to create taxi car park for the taxi operators. So yes, we are concerned about their overall operation, and one of the things you want to do with this conversion process is to bring some semblance of order to your operations, because the hackney carriage by their very nature now are not confined to a particular parking space, and that is why you find them littering the spaces all over the KMTR.
It's not just about the parking, I understand, because we've spoken to them about difficulties letting off people, no designated parking spaces and so on. But again, I'm trying to understand, how is this not just regularizing and institutionalizing disorder? I mean, hasn't it been, haven't we lived the experience that the more and more and more individual taxis we have on the road, the bigger the problem of disorder becomes? Shouldn't we move, in other words, shouldn't the move be towards more and more mass transit and less of these individualized cars, which seem absolutely incapable of operating with any kind of regard to road users and the road code?
And again, we have no disagreement to that. Mass transit has to be the way to go. But we call now that these hackney carriage operators, they're already out there. What we are seeking to do is to transition their license type to give them a license more befitting of the service that they're providing, so that the regulator can bring some semblance of order in terms of their manner in which they operate, their pricing mechanism, and that kind of thing.
You're saying the minister says this is not a new arrangement? Tell me what that means.
I'm not speaking for the ministry. I'm speaking for the Transport Authority.
I understand, but what they're saying is that JUTC has, I'm reading from the statement, based on recommendations from the Transport Authority, issued no objection confirmations permitting a limited number of route taxis to operate along these corridors. It said, and they said this arrangement is not new and does not represent a breach of the exclusive license. So I'm asking you, in terms of from the Transport Authority perspective, is it, when they said this arrangement in terms of route taxes?
Route taxi, it's not new. You have the
meaning what?
Taxi operating within the KMTR from as far back as 2002. I think Jonestown, somewhere in the region of 2007. So it's not new for route taxi to operate alongside the JTC.
Okay, but we're moving towards more and more and more of that rather than less.
I understand the concern, but the point we're making is that this is an arrangement that will allow the regulator to regularize their operation, keep them on specific route, destination marking, that kind of thing, and attach an appropriate fare structure in keeping with the service they're providing now to the customers, because, in fact, they're out there already providing the service. So it's not that we're throwing new operators to the mix.
And I think
a change in the license type.
Yeah, and I think that's precisely the concern when you said they're out there already providing the service, and it doesn't seem as if the Transport Authority has any power to keep them in check. I mean, they just drive anyhow they want to drive, them but drive you, them then do anything they want to do, and they all seem to be a law unto themselves. So when people hear about regularizing more and more, as a driver, you must get concerned.
I understand. Part of that now, Diane, will have to be taken care of in terms of training and public education of our drivers. And it's something that the authority is working towards.
Well, if I were to say that no isn't new, because from before Whoopi killed Philip, Mr. Smith, we're talking about training drivers and training conductors, and I know training programs have taken place. So is it that they're not consistent or what?
Yes, but you're speaking to a particular behavioral problem, and you and I know that behavior change comes about as a result of training.
True.
So if we are able, through training, to convert some of these operators and have them set good examples for their peers to follow, I think we would be on our way to effecting some kind of change. It didn't happen just yesterday, and it will take some time to correct the behavioral issues that are out there.
In your expert opinion, training and working with the transport operators have led to any change in behavior? Because as a road user, I don't feel like it.
It might not be on the level that one would appreciate, but we can attest to the fact that training does, in fact, improve the behavior of the drivers.
So is there going to be any additional attention to these routes now with this arrangement, or is it that seeing that it's just seen as the drivers moving from one category to another, nothing really changes?
When you say additional attention, what do you mean?
I mean, regulation.
Certainly, and that is what this arrangement will allow for the application of the legislative arrangement to support and manage the operations of road taxi.
Nearly out of time, but just one or two questions, if I could, from my listeners. A listener is asking, are road licenses of repeat offenders suspended or revoked?
Our road license of repeat offenders suspended or revoked?
Yeah, meaning drivers, transport operators.
Are they asking if the transport authority has ever suspended any road license for repeat offenders? Is that the question?
That sounds like the question, yes.
Well, what I can speak to, I don't have the numbers now to give you, but I know that there's a suspension revocation policy in treating the conduct and behavior of drivers and conductors. I will have to refresh myself with that is concerned and update you.
Okay. Another listener is asking, how come the public hasn't been educated in terms of the distinction you are making between hackney taxis, hackney drivers and their fees, as opposed to route taxis, so that they understand the difference?
Well, when the fee was increased in 2023, the authority did put out several publications in terms of its fare structure. I accept and we take this as an opportunity now to refresh and remind the commenting public of what those fare structures are.
Is it that the Transport Authority believes the complaints are coming from commuters who don't understand the difference? It sounds as if you're not accepting people saying route taxes are overcharging them.
No, we have accepted that. In fact, we have commissioned our operation team to go into the field and to do the appropriate work. One, in terms of public education, disseminating of the right information, and two, prosecuting, bringing to book the operators who found to transgress in this regard.
All right, have to leave it there, out of time. Appreciate your time as always, Mr. Smith. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.